Welcome. I'm your host, Paula Scatoloni, the founder of Transformative Harmonics, a podcast that offers listeners a synthesis of ancient wisdom and modern science. Hello, listeners. Welcome back to another episode of Transformative Harmonics. I'm your host, Paula Scatoloni. My guest today is someone who I came upon back in the early part of my own transpersonal journey, the latest version of it. If you know me, I'm standing at the intersection of neurophysiology and sound and spirituality, and I was looking for places to turn to understand my own internal experience and also the role of sound. And I came across the work of Tom Kenyon at that time and began to learn about him. I watched the documentary called The Song of the New Earth. I read many of his books, and I began to explore his use of sound and its interaction on the brain itself. So this conversation for me is important because right now we have so many different places and ways in which you might walk into your spiritual expansion. And I do feel that this process, as we're going to talk about it on the show, needs to be grounded and embodied, and also allow you to traverse your psychological material so that the process of expansion is a mature spiritual growth that's grounded in the body and in your understanding of your emotional world, and not just seeking the high that might come from these expanded states. And so Tom, for me, speaks a lot of the same language that I use with my students in why the intersection of these things are so important as you're growing yourself and expanding into the next version of who you are. So I'd like to introduce Tom. If you do not know his work, he is one of the most respected sound healers in the world today. Tom Kenyon is a sound practitioner, a musician, an author, and a psychotherapist whose work explores the intersection of sound, consciousness, and human neurophysiology. He holds a master's degree in psychological counseling and spent over a decade in private clinical practice before shifting his focus towards psychoacoustics and the effect of sound on the nervous system and perception. In 1983, Tom founded the Acoustic Brain Research, an organization dedicated to studying how sound, music, and language influence brain states, creativity, and psychological transformation. His early work combined clinical psychology with emerging research in neurolinguistic programming, hypnosis, and auditory entrainment, which later became the foundation for his sound-based meditation work. Tom's life studies and many lifetimes of remembrances, complete with background knowledge and experience, allow him to move with equal facility between Tibetan Buddhism, Egyptian high alchemy, Taoism, and Hinduism, and the relative sciences relative to each. Over time, Kenyon developed a large body of recordings, teachings, and live workshops centered on the use of sound, toning, and psychoacoustic sound as tools for shifting awareness and facilitating inner experience. Tom is the author of several books, including Brain States, Mind Thieves, the Hathors Material, and the Magdalene Manuscripts. He currently resides in the Pacific Northwest, and his work can be accessed through his website, tomkenyon.com. I hope you take your time today to listen to the message underneath our conversation and also explore Tom's website after the show if you'd like to learn more about him and the work he's doing in the world today. Hello, and welcome back to Transformative Harmonics. I'm your host, Paula Scatoloni. Today, this conversation is very important to me, I think, and the listeners. So I'm going to ask everyone, if you are going about moving quickly around, to take a moment and hit pause and get settled, or grab yourself something cool in this summer, something cool to drink, so you can relax a little into this conversation. As you know, this is all about resonance and frequency. And so everything we say is wanting a place to land, and it can't land if we're moving quickly. So I'll just invite you to take that time before we start and let anything that's ready to land find a home. And if not, you're always welcome to come back to this podcast episode again at another time. So today I am here with Tom Kenyon, who I appreciate we've taken a while to set up this conversation, and I appreciate that we have this time. And I'd like to start, Tom, because I feel we're at a critical point in humanity and in this time. This is why I brought you on specifically, because I feel as a psychotherapist, a brain researcher, an acoustic person who understands acoustics, but also has a very in-depth perspective on what is happening from an evolutionary perspective from our planet, that you have a fairly good read on where we're at, where we're going, the role of sound, some of these bigger questions that I try to tackle in small ways in my community. So I appreciate this wealth of knowledge, and I'm hoping we can just go back and forth and ponder some of these questions that feel so important to me right now. And as an educational platform, trying to get the most accurate information to the community, because there's so much information out there. So thank you. And to start, maybe we can start with a short synopsis of who you are and your background, in case my listeners do not know, although I talk about you in the class, so they should know. But let's brief them a little bit on who you are, and then we'll jump into the bigger questions.
So who am I? That's a good question. I'd like to back up a little bit. The thing that you had your listeners do to calm down, to settle in to receive the information, I think was very cogent, because from my perspective, it has to do with the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. And the sympathetic nervous system is how we engage to do things, to make things happen. And it also creates stress hormones. It's how we organize energy to make things occur. The parasympathetic is the part of the nervous system that relaxes and heals. It's only when we're in deep states of sleep that the body heals itself, which is why sleep is so important. Interestingly enough, spiritual experiences usually emerge in the parasympathetic nervous system, not the part of us that makes things happen. So for those who are multitasking and making multiple things happen, as long as we can manage it, it's fine. But sometimes the overmanagement eclipses the parasympathetic response. So this conversation hopefully will open up the parasympathetic response in everyone, because that's where the treasure lies as far as spiritual transformation.
Yes.
But as far as who I am essentially a 5-year-old boy in a body of a 77-year-old man. It's just as frankly as I can put it. I've had education, blah, 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 but that's at the core. Because when I was 5, I sat in a swing that my dad made for me from a giant oak tree. And my favorite time of night, or between day and night, was sunset. When I would swing for hours, my mom said she'd have to drag me in for dinner. And I was singing to the sun and the moon and the stars and plants and the animals. And I knew they were singing back to me. I could hear them at 5 years old. I, of course, grew up and got educated and decided that was all, delusional. And as I entered the shamanic world and the world of spiritual transformation, guess what? The plants started talking to me again, singing to me. So that's why I say I am a 5-year-old boy in the body of a 77-year-old. Yeah.
Yes. And you keep that childlike perspective in your way of moving through the world.
Yeah. Make it more fun.
Yeah. Definitely. So there's a lot there that's in between in terms of your story. Where you are right now, based on that story, is standing at this intersection of the understanding of spirituality and the brain and science, and also the evolutionary path that we're on as a consciousness, as an organism. And so maybe we can start to talk a little about your perspectives on where we're at right now and as you've traversed trauma healing and sound and brain, how do you describe and help people understand what's happening? Because we are in a resurgence. We are in a massively transformational era.
Fortunately, I'm in a good space today, so I can be positive. But I do have moments where I look at the whole thing and say, this is such a show. There's no hope. And then I go up the escalator to the higher states of my mind potential. And I realize, well, it is chaos. But when you go into a transformational process that's shifting from one way of being to another way of being, there's chaos between as those two systems move into each other. One lets go and one emerges. So unfortunately, in the human experience, chaos is a big part of it. And so we are in a very chaotic, confusing period. We have so much misdirection from authority figures. We have so many lies that are just pervasive. It's crazy. So for me, I'm only speaking from my own perspective. It's the choice is to get into, do I just go into distress about the horrible nature of the chaos and the suffering? Or do I go to a different aspect of my consciousness that has hope, that's authentic and real, not make believe everything's going to be wonderful? And so it's the tightrope walking across that traverse.
Say, okay, we're going to stay in the game and we're going to play this out. What is, when I first came across you, it was through the documentary of the Song of the New Earth. It was the first time I had heard that phrase, the New Earth. And so it began to take me on a story, your story personally, and then a story of something that you were called to engage in.
Yes.
And so maybe we can talk about that, and that may also support the listeners in understanding, where we're heading.
Well, dropped my son off for martial art practice on the island where I live, and there's a place called Madrona Point, which is the native sacred ground with the Lumi tribe. And I decided to go there. It happened to be my birthday. And the Hathors told me several days before the birthday, we're going to have something especially planned for you on your birthday. And so for the first time, I was at a point with them where I was like, Disney. Oh. I was like, I'm not sure. I mean, so much of what they said was right on, but so much of what they said was a violation against my own contracted perception of the world, because they're so much more expansive. So I started meditating when I was 18 and didn't miss the day. So we're talking about, I was 35. I didn't meditate. I wouldn't connect with Hathors. I did everything to avoid them. But you want to do something special? Well, watch this. And I just locked down. So I'm sitting on the ground at Madrona Point, and all of a sudden the ground opens up. And this was a physical sensory experience, which is why I was heavily altered, because my brain had to have been, they shifted my brain physiology. I was in deeply parasympathetic state, and the ground opened up, and my body grabbed, because that was my experience. I was not my body. I was in my body. My body grabbed the grass with the hands to try to keep me from falling into a hole. And as I fell into the hole, there were the Indian natives saying, we would like to know if you'll sing the Song of the New Earth when you come back. Come back from where? Go down deeper. Then there were Aborigines spinning these fire sticks and playing didgeridoos. It was a cacophony of imagery and sensory information. And finally, I dropped down into what I experienced as the center of the earth. And that this is my personal experience. I'm not saying this is how it is. It was a sphere of light, and it spoke, and it said, I am the earth dreamer. I dreamed this world into existence. I'm getting ready to change my dream. Will you sing the song of the new earth? And I had learned through having interacted with some extraordinarily illuminated people to don't jump on the ship just because it's leaving the dock. Instead, I'll think about it. Then I pull back up, and the Aborigines say, will you sing the song? I'll think about it. And we come up, and the natives are doing their thing. And I said, I'll think about it. And I came back up into my body. And shockingly, a young couple had come into the park and sat maybe just a few feet, maybe 6 feet from me, and were obviously in an amorous mood, because there are very few people in Madrona Point. And so he's taking off his shirt and she's unbuttoning her blouse and they're getting ready to do their thing. And I'm going, oh my God, they're going to turn around. What do I say to him? I say, I was here first. So, and I thought this was so fascinating and an important point. The young woman turned her head and says, something's not right. Let's go further down. So that was feminine intelligence, the wisdom of the feminine. The dude was just on it. He was off his shit. He was pumped up. He's ready to go. But the wisdom of the feminine says, no. We'll still do that, but let's go somewhere else. And I think that's a critical point in our culture. Our culture is overly patriotic, overly stimulated into the sympathetic response, make things happen as quick as possible. And we're paying a price, a terrible price. But all of this comes back. I'm reminded of an experience I had with the holder of the Hopi tablets, Grandfather Martin, and my wife, Judy, helped them in federal court trying to get resolve some native issues. So she had a relationship with him and his family. So we drove to his mesa and we got there and we asked where he was, and his grandson said he's in the back. And so we went into the other Eva, and he's all dressed up. And Judy told me later she'd never seen him dressed up so well. And he said, Spirit told me that a very important person was coming. Spirit was talking about my wife, not me, by the way. Just be clear on that. Mm-hmm. Very important point. I'm just messenger here, the little messenger boy. Mm-hmm. So, and he said, thank God you finally arrived because I have to go out and pick corn. I don't have time for this. And so we started to talk, and then he relaxed, and it was an amazing thing. And at one point, and the Hopi talk about the fifth world. That's why I'm referencing this, because the fifth world is a different energetic experience of this planet. And the Hopi believe that that's where we're headed to. The Hathors also believe that's what we're headed to. But we're in a terribly difficult birthing process. Mm. But at one point, this was before the Twin Towers were attacked. And he said, I had a dream that something is going to attack the Twin Towers. This was a long time before the actual towers were hit. He said, if it comes from the east, it'll be okay. If it comes from the west, not good. Or I may have it reversed. Mm-hmm. And he said, and I noticed there was a tanka on the wall from Tibet. And I said, what is that? And he said, well, a Tibetan Rinpoche came to visit me and he handed that to me as a gift. And he said, in Tibet, and what's interesting about Tibet and Hopi land is that they are reversed. Some of the words are the exact opposite. The architecture is very, very similar, especially in the personal living spaces. And he said, in Tibet, there are places where you can stand and you can be transported through the center of the earth to Hopi land. So we go on it. My wife and I went on it, took a group to Tibet. We've been to Tibet 4 times. And we were in a cave that was opposite Lhasa, with the main temple area. And it was a little stone marker in the floor. And I stood there and I was in a Hopi land, just like the earth experience that took me down to the center of the earth. So there's several ways of looking at it, but the way I look at that is that matter is an illusion, a very important illusion, but it is an illusion. It's similar to a propeller on a plane that has, 3 little spokes in it. When you see it, when it's not turned on, it's clearly distinct propellers. When it starts to spin, it becomes a disc. The disc appears because our eyes can't see that quickly, can't process visual information that quickly, so it appears solid, but it's not. Our bodies are similar, and the earth is similar. So that's how I accommodate how I went from Tibet, the Hopi land, to a conduit to earth, which somehow relates to my experience out on Madrona Point.
So as you're putting that all together, as you came out of that experience, what prompted you to say yes to the request?
I felt motivated to do something to help. Hopefully that is going to be true. We're in the process. With compassion, I guess, and compassion for the earth itself, not just the sentient beings who live on her. Again, we're representing the feminine.
So answering the call.
Yeah.
Which many are hearing now.
Yes. Fortunately. Yay.
Yay. Yay. And then there's an arduous task, though, as you answer that call to have discernment along the way.
Absolutely. That is so important.
Yes. And so what are you seeing within that topic?
I've been doing psychotherapy for over 40 years. Trained in multiple modalities in college, and I did postgraduate work in Ericksonian medical hypnosis, and I've worked with people for 40 years. The clients are coming to me are more poised to shift radically and faster than the entire 4 decades that I've been doing it for. So something is happening at the personal individual level. And I think we sometimes forget that the collective, how vast it is made of individual choices that each of us are making in our.
So it's almost like we have computer programming that's ready to shift. It's
computer model. Yeah. I could see. Yeah. The hidden software. Looking for the cue. You hit the button, you hit the right codes in, then bang, the software has changed.
Yes.
Being upgraded,
It's being upgraded through the heart.
Yeah. Yes, and yes. That is the portal. In ancient Egyptian alchemy, there are these symbols of the Ammit, which is a crocodile, a hippopotamus, and a lion, the great devourer. And he is shown next to Ma'at. And Ma'at is a goddess that has the scales and weighs people at the moment of death. And if their hearts are light as a feather, she admits them into paradise. If they are contracted, they go down to the lower worlds. And Ammit would have his snout tucked between something called the Jid. And the Jid pillar is the movement of life force up. And he would have his snout tucked between the heart center and the power center. And if they did not have the heart open, he would devour them at the moment of death, because they were coming solely from the desire for security, sex, and power. It was only when the heart opened and they could see the higher potentials of their being that the Ammit would let them pass. So that's a symbol of the importance of the heart in that tradition. And other traditions speak about the same thing, but in different language, metaphoric, etc.
Yes. And we can also maybe touch into the importance with that particular civilization and that path. There was the opening of both the heart and the power center.
Yes.
And the connection between the two.
Right.
What are the dangers of people opening just the heart and not the lower?
Neurosis, psychosis, big problems. I do see that there is a spiritual aspect, that everything is love. And that is true ultimately. But when you get down to the fine points of being in matter, there are other forces at play. And so if a person does not attend to taking care of their security, managing their sexual energy wisely, making choices through their power, there's not a base to support the heart opening. It's almost a developmental thing.
Or spiritual maturity.
Yeah.
Yes. So as we see more and more people, although it's a spiritual renaissance right now, which is great, there can be some danger in that, in maybe the exploration of plant medicine or other mediums that may take people into higher states without the grounded, embodied understanding of what's in the dark.
Yeah. My first Taoist teacher, Master Wu, said, Tom, before you step into heaven, step on earth first. And what he meant was make sure there's a solid platform to support these extraordinary experiences. Otherwise, it can lead into delusion and all types of problems. We have to be grounded to walk this path with clarity and authenticity.
That is one of the reasons I love sound and psychoacoustics, because I think it can be tremendously grounding and support all dimensions. But we can make sure that bottom dimension is really taken care of as well.
Yeah.
As you've watched that field unfold, psychoacoustics, I'm thinking about trends or things that you're seeing. When I first started using that word psychoacoustics, the people around me didn't know what I was talking about. I had to keep, referencing and turning them. And now it feels like sound is certainly more mainstream. And psychoacoustic is becoming more of they're starting to do more studies, even more. You were in the emergence of the field. That was 40 years ago. Yeah. So, what's your observation of the field of psychoacoustics right now?
Well, when I first started working with psychoacoustics, in the dictionary, it was psycho acoustics, which was simply the acoustic. They would then look at the mental, but later I noticed that the spelling was also with an H, which would make it the emotional, intellectual impact of sound. So when I first started this work, I had come across the work of Stanislav Grof, and I had connected to something called music that supports image streaming, which is an alpha technique for generating alpha activity in the brain. And I noticed that they were using, that particular researcher was using Baroque music called the Largo movements. And I was very fascinated with this was measured. This was the first studies that were done to show that, and it's not Stanislav Grof, it's another researcher's name will come to me at some point. And they discovered that the brain did produce alpha activity through listening to Baroque music. I started to play Baroque music for my clients as I was doing medical hypnosis, and it really facilitated more happened per minute in terms of being efficient change agents. And being a musician, I decided I was going to compose some music just out of innocence to see if I could create the same thing. And it did for my clients. And they preferred my music over the Baroque music, but that's because I think they were familiar with me. But it turned into a whole thing. When I started to produce these cassette tapes, we're talking way, way back. And what the turning point for me came when I got a letter from Dr. Wilson. And he was a physiologist researcher at a university. And he said he was in a class teaching about music and brain function. And he made the statement, music can increase alpha activity, but it can't produce theta activity. And one of the students said, sir, I disagree. I have in my hands a cassette tape that does just that. He said, well, bring it up. And what I loved about Dr. Wilson is to say, no, that's not possible. He engaged the scientific method. Let's see what happens. He brought up another student, hooked him up, and the machine showed increased theta activity. He was like, this can't happen. He thought there was something wrong with the machine. He tried to recalibrate it. I believe the story was that he brought in a tech person to look at it and clear the equipment. The next class, he picked another student, did the same thing, moved theta activity. What blew his mind and what I find so interesting is the interface between science and spirituality. The biggest impact of the sound field was at the crown chakra. And it just happens that when you do an EEG study, that's one of the points. It just seems to be arbitrary, but it actually aligns with the crown chakra. And it lit up like a Christmas tree. He had been reading the works of Patanjali, the ancient yogi, and knew about the heart, about the crown chakra. And it blew his mind that so much of the theta activity was there at the crown. And he thought that was a very important point because that theta allows you to do hands-on healing and explore altered state consciousness. It's a door that can open tremendous vistas. And sound clearly can produce theta activity. And the first researcher to study theta activity as a response to shamanic drumming was a woman by the name of Maxwell. So it blew his mind that this was real. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it was very full.
The beginning of understanding sound as a healing therapy.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm. And when most people think about sound, they do think of drums or bowls. They don't think of acoustics themselves and the manipulation of frequency and how frequency can be developed.
That's where the art form comes in.
Yes. And so that seems to also be growing right now, where I'm seeing and meeting musicians who ask me to listen to something they've created, to feel what happens in my body with it. And I can feel energetically sentience in their production. It's amazing. And so this is going to jump or move us into talking about the Hathors, because that is also this ability to tune into higher states of consciousness and higher intelligence, to also take that field of understanding psychoacoustics and expand it even more into ways that are helpful and healing. And so maybe we can talk a little about that story of how that came, because there's also some research you did when that started happening.
You're talking about when the Hathors came to me?
When they came and then they said, well, do this with your clients. And so then you did, and you started to test out, right, the information that was happening.
Yeah, I was highly resistant when they showed up. Very resistant, because I thought this is just absolutely delusional. And then the big moment came when I did a private meditation retreat using Siddhas yoga, and two beings were in the room. I couldn't see them physically, but I could feel their presence. And one spoke and one never spoke. I think he was a student teacher, and he was sent to a project to work with a primitive human, and the observer would check to see if he followed the protocols correctly. But anyway, and first thing the one says to me that speaks is, we are the Hathors, and we come with the sounding of a new reality for your earth. And then they started to teach me the geometry of consciousness. And they gave me specific geometries to work with. And they said, this will change how your brain organizes information. I said, okay, whatever. And I tried it, and my God, it did. It was changing my perception. So being the analytical, contracted person, I decided to prove them wrong. And I decided to create 3 different beta test sites in Washington State, 3 different cities. And I went to each of these cities and taught the geometry for several weeks. And people were changing. It was unbelievable. As a therapist, watching this unfold. How does this work? That was my fundamental question here. There was a professor who was a professor of art, and he was supposed to do an art show, and he was in a crisis mode because he hadn't created art in years. He had no inspiration. And if he didn't do the show, his job would be in jeopardy. He did these geometries, and suddenly he was filled with enthusiasm. People who were horribly depressed came out of depression. I'm not saying that is a cure for depression. I want to be clear. I'm just saying that's what happened for them. One of the ones that really stood out for me was a woman who, because of trauma, had no awareness of her back, the backside of her body, no neurological connection. Isn't that weird? And then I think that was the last class, and she's going around, feel my back, touch my back. I can feel for the first time. That struck me as extraordinarily important. And that's why I decided to, let's go into this and see what opens up. And here I am.
Oh. And so it makes me think that so much of, we want to understand, like, how does sacred geometry work? How does non-localized healing work? How do we take these higher technologies that come through us, whether it's, it was given to you as a prescription, as a very specific, for me, it comes through just playlists of songs, and trusting that the healing field itself, there's intelligence in it, and that this is different than what, we think we know it all as humans. We think we...
Yes, we're full of hubris as humans. We're full of hubris.
Yeah, so it's very humbling, I feel, right, to become co-creators with the field.
It's an honor, a privilege, and it's fun, joyful to connect with a field that is moving upward and expanding. It's very, very interesting, wonderful experience.
Yes, I love that. And I love the scientific part of that story as well. It gives people that option of, we'll test it out. We don't have to, if we feel a little reservation about what's coming through, our channels that we can test it out. But also have discernment. And that's a question I have for you too, as more and more people open the psychic pathways or pathways of higher intelligence. What type of discernment do we need to have to traverse, right, that next level of being more telepathic or being more sensitive energetically?
That was like a simple question, but it is so complex. Let me try to break it down the best I can. First of all, as human mammals, we are a mammal. We share things with the animal kingdom. We have a neocortex, so we think differently than animals, but it's not necessarily better. That's very important because in our hubris, we think we are the ones. It is so complex. I'm almost like, okay, Tom, get on the horse, pull in the reins. Let's get on it. I mean, I'm overwhelmed by the complexity of it, but there are a few simple points in this. The one is our psychological flaws are part of the equation. All of us are damaged to some degree, some incredibly damaged, but all of us have been confined by experiences and family systems and cultures and civilization that come and gone. So we have a lot of burden with ourselves. If you are going to explore sound healing, and the vibratory nature of things and instruments to convey information and energy. If you're doing it from, oh, aren't I great? I am doing something so wonderful. Well, then you miss the point. And it's always a temptation because the ego is not a bad thing. The ego is simply a reference point for identity, but it's not the solutions to life problems will not come from our ego. It's going to come from other aspects conjoined with our ego so our ego can function at a higher level. The discrimination, I think it's wonderful that people are exploring the use of sound. It's just expanding. Out of that, every human invention has had wonderful insights and terrible consequences, if you look at history. So we have to have discrimination so that be absolutely intellectually honest with yourself. I'm talking to whoever's doing the sound work and exploration. Don't take something that somebody has told you is the way it is, because that's just their perception. You might explore that, but don't necessarily buy it until it proves itself to you. And then the fundamental question underneath all that is, why are you doing it? Why are you engaging a potentially healing modality? Why? That question is the fundamental compass. As what we perceive, what we believe to be true becomes our perception.
Mm-hmm.
So when we use sound, we're activating one of the most primal forces of the cosmos, and out of ancient India, Brahma is the god that uttered the sound Om, and his consort Sarasvati is the goddess of language and intelligence. And he uttered the sound Om, and the whole thing is vibrating with that fundamental Om. And I love a metaphor that comes out of Hinduism, which is where Vishnu is laying back on a lotus, of course, a lotus, and out of his power center is the little Brahma. So Vishnu is that which sustains things. Brahma is that which creates new things. And what it is saying, even while the old is there, a new vision is coming forward. That's Brahma. A new world is being created. And that's where we are. The sustainer of the world, that through the metaphor of Vishnu, something is happening and these new energies are coming up and it's the new Brahma and new cycle of creation. And I think that's what we're moving into. So as a sound healer or one simply exploring sound healing, which is really wonderful, just realize that you're dealing with something that is profoundly powerful and hopefully do it with the right intention.
And you can say if you agree or not, I like to propose that our inner guidance, if we've used sound before in other lifetimes or been a healer before, will actually guide us through.
Absolutely.
And that is actually your best teacher rather than, So that's more of how I approach it. And so you will know if you are a teacher or a user of a particular method because the memory is restored as you heal your trauma, and the clarity of your relationship with the instrument or the music is organically comes through. So it's not about learning this way. It's about learning through your body. So I hope that message is getting out there in different ways. There's so many. Again, it's beautiful to see such a variety of ways to heal. So I don't want to, say don't heal, but just having discernment of the places that you go.
And discernment is something that develops over time. You see what works and what doesn't work. So if you're authentic with yourself and true to what's emerging, you will see that these things just flower by themselves, and you discern which of the blossoms you want to work with and explore. And I do think that for some of us, that pulling to a particular instrument or way of working probably comes out of a previous lifetime. So
that's what it feels like. Yes. Okay. And so the last piece is a piece also that we're exploring in my program, which is the emergence of other gifts as well, such as using the voice, maybe in the way that songs are coming through us, songs that we don't know the songs, like where did that song come from? Maybe it's in another language. Maybe it's in our language. And so the ways in which we can allow that to organically come through without feeling like we have to explain it. And if we do explain it, how does one explain it to people?
Well, when a baby, and you're in the living room of your house and you have a young child, an infant, usually the mother is the one who picks it up, but the father sometimes picks it up, can tell what's going on with the baby by the sounds it makes. Everything's fine. Not good. Go take care of the child. That's the primal directive. Our brains are hardwired into all of our senses, and sound is a powerful transformer of energy, consciousness, and potential. But it does come down to, it's a visceral response. Our bodies have a visceral response to sound, especially if the sound is aligned with where we are energetically at that moment.
It's as if we are tuning forks, resonating who we are, resonating the consciousness through the voice. So yeah, it's going to be interesting because it seems like more and more of that is also evolving around us. And so we'll see where things are at in another few months or year. It's something I'm watching.
Yeah, things are moving very fast.
Things could be very different in just a few months even. So as we wrap up, Tom, and my hope for this was to bring someone in who is holding the whole picture and seeing how are we navigating this? Are there any other important pieces that you feel the listeners may need to consider as they continue to embark and say yes to the call?
Well, I would go back to the metaphor out of Hinduism, which is we are both Vishnu, the sustainer. We are also Brahma, the creator of new realities, and we're Shiva, that destroys things. So part of the art of working with all of this is to know when something needs to be dealt with forcefully through the force of Shiva, metaphorically, or through the Vishnu aspect, which is to let things be, or Brahma, the creation of new realities. If you're choosing to step into sound as a catalyst for transformation, you are in that interface between Brahma and Vishnu. Out of Vishnu's body, the new reality is coming forward, and you are the tuning fork, to use your language here, that's setting the vibration, and the vibration goes out and it affects the people that are listening, and those who are ready to shift in that direction will make that shift, and those who are not will not. And there's no judgment about any of it. It's just the phenomena of existence.
So staying in your own body, working on your own resonance, being in integrity with what you bring.
Right.
and honoring the power of the tool itself.
All of those will create a catalyst that supports the rapid unfoldment of your potential as a sound healer.
Well, I've appreciated just getting a teeny bit of time with you today. I feel like I could ask a ton more questions, but I'm going to close and just send the listeners to your website, your wealth of CDs, options for exploring sound with the Hathors and with you. And is there anything else?
A lot of it is free.
A lot of it's free now. I saw that. Yes.
Because I think this information can be of benefit and it should be made available to people without them having to pay for everything.
Yes. So I will make sure that your website is there. I will make sure the Song of the New Earth is still easily available through Gaia TV and through some other platforms. And so they can access that. And are you doing anything live anymore?
I just decided to do website events because the world is in such chaos right now. And the price of traveling and lodging is going to make it out of sight for many people. And I really feel that those who don't have the financial platform to support that type of indulgence, so to speak, I want to address that. So I'm making the material on the website accessible to everybody so they don't have to travel. I plan on creating something next year publicly, but we'll see how things unfold. I just don't know.
Well, I'll keep my eyes out. Be sure to get on his mailing list. And then the books. I haven't talked about the books, but please check out Tom's books. They're beautiful. If you haven't been introduced to the Hathors, you are missing a lot. So I will direct people that way. And I thank you, Tom, for the time you spent today with our community. Mm-hmm. I appreciate it. Thank you for being a part of the Transformative Harmonics podcast. If this discussion resonated with you, please subscribe, share the episode, or write a review. This helps to support the expanding community around embodiment, sound, and conscious living. You can visit Transformative Harmonics at paulascatoloni.com to find out more about my work, forthcoming classes, and the Transformative Harmonics Academy. You can also reach out and connect with me on Instagram. My handle is at Paula Scatoloni. I write regularly on Substack at Signature Frequency Living. Until next time, take good care, and thank you for being part of the journey.